Welcome to the Homeschool High School podcast, brought to you by Seven Sisters Homeschool.com and the Ultimate Homeschool Podcast Network. I'm Vicki, and I am so excited to talk about something completely different for us. So today we are talking to Justin McGeary, and he's going to talk about Oxford-style tutoring, which made me very excited because it made me think of Professor Kirkpatrick, who was C.S. Lewis's tutor, who changed his whole life. So, Justin, tell us a little bit about yourself and your homeschooling background and about Oxford style tutoring. So, start with
Yeah.
your homeschooling.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Vicki.
Yeah.
This is really a privilege. So I love what you guys are doing with the Seven Sisters homeschooling, where you are providing all sorts of resources to help families homeschool.
Mhm.
Um, so I, and I can say that as someone who graduated as a high school homeschooler a while back. Really, the internet was just getting started. So we didn't have, we were kind of homeschooling really when, you're still kind of going to conventions and things and buying curriculum. And now,
Yes.
the post-internet has just provided so many more opportunities and possibilities for home education.
Yes.
So I guess a little bit about my journey with that was um, my mom at some point really kind of got excited about the idea of homeschooling, but was very, I think, reluctant or nervous about doing it. It felt very, um, it felt weighty, I guess.
Mhm.
And my dad was also, I think, a little bit on the fence
Mhm.
about things like socialization and that
Yeah.
sort of thing. But then, actually, one of the things that happened was one of my siblings ended up being diagnosed with leukemia, and so uh, that actually created the opportunity, really, for my mom to start testing the home education, homeschooling, because obviously my brother would have to go for treatments, and sometimes he was not well,
Yeah.
and so he was being educated at home part of the time, and I can't remember, for a few years, I would go talk to his teachers after, every day or every few days and get his homework for him.
Mhm.
But then we ended up right when I was in about middle school. My mom took the dive because the school we were attending closed,
Mhm.
and a tiny kind of Christian school, and it was just elementary school essentially,
Mhm.
and there weren't that many options actually where we were. There was an elite prep school, which was just very, very expensive.
Mhm.
Other Christian schools were just kind of far away. Our
Mhm.
public school was not one that really had much of an educational reputation at all.
Mhm.
And so then that left home education, which my mom had been kind of excited about. So we went for it. And so my mom homeschooled at the time. There was three of us, and then we had two more come along. So
Oh, wow.
we there's all sorts of interesting things about that journey. We started off kind of essentially just doing traditional school at home, but then as we kind of gained some experience and got exposure to what other homeschoolers were doing, again, we didn't have the internet, so it's kind of like, what did you see other
Yes.
people doing?
Right.
So we became more flexible. There's like traveling opportunities. We got more creative in the kind of projects and things that we were doing. Took physics with a physics professor at one of the homeschool families that we homeschooled with. Their dad taught physics at the major university nearby, and he
Oh,
tested out one of his physics textbooks on us.
oh my goodness.
So, there's all sorts of kind of fun things like
Yeah.
that. But one thing, I guess, that's sort of related to what I do now, which is the Trinity House tutorials, was I remember when I was gearing up to graduate and go off to college, a lot of people would say to me, "Oh, you're homeschooled and you're going off to college. Oh, I hope you're okay. Like, I hope that's
Oh,
not like a massive, culture shock or some sort
oh,
of." So I remember being like going into college thinking, "Oh, I'm homeschooled. I must be at a disadvantage compared to my peers because here I am. I've been taken out of the system and I'm being thrown back into the system." Or something like that must be how people were thinking. But it turned out to not be the case, even though I studied very hard that first year, almost all the time, because I had this sort of weight hanging over me. But it turns out I thought that home education actually was probably better adapted for the college level and the flexibility and sort of independent learning that you really are doing in college, more so than in high school.
Yeah.
And actually, of the home educated kids that I knew when I was in college and that I've watched over the years, very rarely have I seen one really flounder. Actually, I can't think of one off the top at all. So that was kind of one of those things that was in my mind going into the home education. So, or going into college from the home education background. Fast forward to my junior year of college, I actually ended up going to Oxford, which was a lot of fun.
How did you end up at Oxford? You have to tell us about that.
Yeah, so I went to actually a Christian liberal arts college that was a part of the consortium of colleges, Christian colleges, where they have a program over in Oxford.
Oh,
The name of the program was Scholarship in Christianity in Oxford, SCIO. And so essentially we got a full kind of term of Oxford study. So we got to experience the tutorial system, go to lectures, see all the libraries, as well as then there was built into it some traveling and getting to see kind of British culture and history as well. So I took a tutorial in modern English literature and a secondary tutorial in 19th century American literature. And then I did all sorts of I went to different types of lectures. I went to the most interesting one, though, was a lecture series on J.R.R. Tolkien and the use of Old English literature in his Lord of the Rings. And so, it was really well done. The scholar, interestingly enough, did not anticipate how popular it would be. So the first day, and part of it is because there were a decent number of Americans who are kind of enamored with Lewis and Tolkien.
Yes.
But so we were all jam-packed into this tiny little lecture room, and he was like, what is going on here? And so he ended up having to the next week reschedule for a different lecture hall that had more space. So it was a blast getting the exposure. There's all sorts of benefits that came from it. One, just being able to see a different educational system and compare it. So then I had home education with traditional education, with my college education, with the British Oxford education. So it created a real interest in just how do we learn, how do we structure our learning, and these sorts of things. That's just been really something that's kind of continued with me. So that's a little bit about my journey, I guess, from homeschooling into the college years.
Yeah, that is so interesting. All right, so for those of us who are Americans, we're not really exposed to the idea that there's a completely different way of educating that they use at Oxford.
Yeah.
And it is how C.S. Lewis would have been educated, and there's just normal life over there. For us, tutoring sounds like, oh, you're behind in math, I'm getting you a tutor to help you catch up. So you're fixing something broken. But with Oxford style education, what is tutoring?
Yeah. So yeah, this is a key point of distinction. So yeah, usually when we hear about tutoring in an American context, we think, oh, you must be behind or something. And maybe we think of it, and maybe there's this sort of maybe elite sense in which we think about, oh, you can hire a personal tutor or something like that. But again, it's often thought of as, well, you must be behind in something.
Catch up for something.
Yeah, exactly. So, but at Oxford, as well as Cambridge, they both are using this, what we'll call the tutorial model. And in Cambridge, they, for whatever reason, they in Oxford have to use different language. They call them supervisions.
Okay.
So what you do is that at the heart of the Oxford education is the tutorial. Now, you can go to lectures. There's libraries, there's seminars, but really the essence is this tutorial. And what the tutorial is it's sort of grounded in the idea of, or goal, I should say, of creating independent learners and very critical, careful thinkers. And so one of the ways that they do that, there's two key, I would say, key features of the tutorial. One is the importance of essay writing, and the other is then the importance of the conversation in the tutorial. So the tutor gives the student, for whatever the course of study it is for that particular term, they give them each week a list of they call them essay titles, essentially questions or prompts. And the student reads through them and decides which question they want to tackle. And then there's usually also included in that list a bunch of resources that the student can use to answer that question. So the tutor sort of curates, here are the most important things that have been said on this topic. So the first tutorial I attended in Oxford for my primary tutorial on modern English literature or modernist English literature was on T.S. Eliot's poem, The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. And so I had all of the kind of most important things that have been written on that poem. And obviously I had to read the poem as well, and then come back with an essay. And then what happens is from there, you actually read your essay to your tutor after a whole week of reading as much as you can to answer that question. You come back, you read your answer to the tutor, and then the tutor will jump in and give feedback. You'll start discussing what other things you learned, what you thought about, and kind of using the essay as a means for figuring out your understanding of the topic and your thoughts on it. That's one of the things I think that's actually a huge difference between this kind of Oxford tutorial model versus even college level instruction in kind of an American setting, which is the real emphasis in the tutorial is, what does the student think? What are the student's arguments?
Yes.
Even though they've tried to master what other people have said, the goal is not for them to regurgitate and say, so-and-so says, this other important person says, this lesser known person says, right? It's not just pulling together what everyone has said. That's still what a lot of folks are doing in American colleges, is being regurgitating back to your lecturer, your professor, and showing that you've understood what they've said more or less.
Right.
So that's a big difference. And the essay plays this huge essay writing plays a huge role in sort of getting developing the critical thinking of the student. And then in conversation, being able to defend your ideas. My first essay, it was definitely a leap for me to go from kind of a more American approach to the more British approach. Or I should say the Oxford approach, because not all British universities do it exactly like Oxford or Cambridge. So I remember it was so painful, that first tutorial. But then I adapted and started to kind of see, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, not this, that. So there was a bit of a steep learning curve, but I remember thinking, this essay is terrible, as I was reading it out loud to this tutor and just thinking, oh man, I have no idea what's going on here. But one of the things is that the tutorial and the essay writing really showed me where the limits of my understanding were. So there's tons of writing, but I think that tons of writing, but one of the things that students I found with Trinity House is that they enjoy the writing because it matters and because they're going to get feedback on it. It's not where they just write an essay, send it off, and maybe in several weeks they'll get some red ink back in a grade. So it's rigorous, but it's enjoyable in many ways. There are moments, of course, where the thinking and the writing, it takes discipline and it's hard work, right? And hard work is not always fun, but in the end, the students, I saw lots of growth in my own learning in that term. And that's what I've found with the students that we've had at Trinity House. Feel free to ask a follow-up.
Excuse me. Yeah, what it sounds like is, in that kind of tutoring, it's not a fixing a broken, it's a helping the student to become, to discover, to think things through, to grow
Yeah.
in their understanding. And that's so it's also a relational learning. So you
Yes.
do the research, the essay, and then the conversations with the tutor
Yes.
are important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, yeah, you hit on a few things there. Very relational, very conversational.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's this great emphasis, I think, on language, right? Working in the written language, working in spoken language,
Mm-hmm.
being able to defend what you think, and the tutor plays very much not so much a quizzer. I'm
Mm-hmm.
testing you. I
Mm-hmm.
need to give you a grade. It's much more of a senior scholar and junior scholar, or some people will use the language of like um, a coach, right? Like if you have a physical trainer, the goal of the physical trainer is to help you get stronger or
Mm-hmm.
perform in your sport better. Um, and that's very much what an Oxford tutor is doing. Because one of the things is that the exams that they have at Oxford usually come all at the end. They're big exams.
Uh,
And so they're trying to get their students ready for
uh,
passing those exams. And those exams, though, aren't like, multiple choice. They're all going to be, at least in the humanities, essay exams.
mm,
And so they're really trying to help the student be a very well-rounded communicator, thinker, as well as specialized in their particular area of study. Um, there was one other thing. Oh, yeah, going back to what the tutor is doing. We talked just a little bit before the call about C.S. Lewis and his relationship with the Great Knock, as he called him,
yeah.
who was this just real rigorous. And if students want to get a sense for something of what a tutorial is like, they can go read Surprised by Joy. There's a
Yeah.
whole chapter on the Great Knock.
Yes.
That guy was pretty intense. Not every tutor is like lock down, rigorous, and make
Yes.
sure everything is logical. Another great example, actually, of the tutorial is in the Chronicles of Narnia, where at the very beginning of the book, Lucy goes into the wardrobe and comes back, and she's like, "Hey, I've been to another world." And of course, they're initially like, "Whoa, what are you talking about?" And then Edmund goes, right? But Edmund comes back and says, "Oh, wasn't it a fun game?" And so now Peter and Susan are kind of like, "Well, who do we believe?" And so they end up going to talk to the professor in
Yes.
whose house they've been living to be like, "Is our sister crazy?" And
Mm,
what he does is he doesn't actually tell them exactly what the answer is. He leads them by a series of questions to
yeah.
think through for themselves. Is your sister crazy? It's actually kind of like, and it wouldn't be so terribly surprising, like an Oxford tutorial. And they kind of are brought to this point where he sort of leads them by discussion to the conclusion, she's the much more reliable one. She
Mm-hmm.
doesn't make up these sort of stories. So maybe she's right. And he actually says, what do you think is the most likely answer?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a great example, I think, of a tutorial, except they just don't have the essay part of it.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. Oh,
but
what do they teach them in these schools these days?
yeah, exactly. And so that, yeah, they're taught to think about the situation, and it's a real life situation, but they get a tutorial. And one of the things I think that makes me excited about that example of the tutorial
Mhm,
is that the idea that education should be connecting us
mhm.
to the way the world is, to reality,
Yeah.
not just sort of abstract,
Mhm.
um, pure abstraction that has nothing to do with life. So it's I think, a great example of really good
Yeah. Yeah.
tutoring for the purpose of navigating the real world.
So these days, you are in a doctoral program yourself, right? In
Yeah.
the Netherlands, is that right?
Yeah, so I'm working on my PhD through the Free University of Amsterdam in late 19th century American religious theological history. So yeah.
Do you have the opportunity there to do any, have a tutor there?
So the dissertation actually is kind of similar. It's like a tutorial over several years,
Yeah.
where you're going to write several chapters at whatever pace you agree upon with the university, and you hand it into your dissertation advisor, and they pretty much come back to you and say, "This is good. This is not good.
Mhm.
Tell me about this," and you discuss what you write. So in many ways, the tutorial is kind of it is kind of geared towards advanced learning.
Yeah.
or helping students move towards more advanced, higher levels of thinking, um, writing, that sort of thing.
Yeah, because to do your dissertation, you really need that whole higher level of thinking. You're going deeper, and
Yeah.
to have someone to question and pull things out of you, that is real important.
Yeah.
You have also taught college yourself.
Yeah. I've taught
Mhm,
I taught at a Christian liberal arts college for about 5 years.
mhm.
Sadly, the college closed last year, like many institutions of
Mhm.
higher learning, just in the
Yeah,
last 5 or so years, just lots
yeah.
of schools closing. But that was actually where it was during that time that I started thinking about developing this kind of a
Yeah.
tutoring company that developed into Trinity House. So originally, I was thinking, I'm seeing students come into college lacking some of what seemed to be basic study skills, the
Mhm.
ability to read carefully and analytically, the ability to write clearly, to manage their time with their studying, doing some research skills. And so essentially sort of what we call sort of the fundamentals of learning.
Yeah.
But I also saw that a lot of what you find out there is just technique, disconnected from um, essentially pedagogy or uh, philosophy of education or worldview. Like,
Yes.
what are
Yeah.
the things that motivate us to
Mhm,
learn, right?
mhm.
And so I wanted to connect, particularly Christian worldview thinking, with the how of learning.
Yeah.
And it was actually thinking through this and trying to figure out how do we bring these things together, that actually I was reflecting on the Oxford experience that I had and thought, you know what, this would bring all of this together. And so we've created now courses that follow this kind of Oxford tutorial method in kind of Western history. We do ancient Greece and Rome. We do medieval and Renaissance periods. We do an American history of 1 and 2. And then
Mhm.
we've paired in Oxford, you have what are called primary tutorials, which meet every week for term. And you have secondary tutorials, which meet less frequently. And so we've got our history, our history tutorials, and then we also have our secondary tutorials, which are often literature focused, that pair well with the
Mhm.
primary tutorial. So, and then we offer summer exploratory tutorials and January
Mhm.
exploratory
Mhm.
tutorials, so that we're getting students exposed to some of the great books. They get
Uh-huh.
to write about them.
Mhm.
So for this summer, we're doing actually just a short tutorial, somewhere around 4 or 5 weeks, on comparing the life and thought of Jonathan Edwards with Ben Franklin, kind of two different
Oh,
folks, to kind of give a picture of this kind of pre-revolutionary period, what's going on in
mhm.
American thought and life.
Mhm.
So that's one of, and it's a little bit more, we're calling them exploratory. This is something we made up. They don't do that in Oxford,
Yeah.
but just to make it a little bit more introductory.
Yeah.
Um, and so we're then hopefully going to develop out some more kind of courses. Um, but actually, if I could say, one of the things I found that students love is, so the writing initially is a little intimidating, but we can adapt with the tutorial based on students' needs, because it's highly personalized.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to drown students, we want them to actually learn. So
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
one of the things. But students really enjoy
Yeah.
digging into a topic, because the tutorial is definitely about depth over breadth.
Right. Mhm.
Um, so, and one of my students actually that we're currently going through we're finishing up actually the medieval and Renaissance history sequence. He told me recently that his confidence in his writing has just skyrocketed,
Yeah.
because he's gotten through the routine
Mhm.
of he's written so much, he gets immediate feedback, which means he can go back and make adjustments, make changes to his writing.
Mhm.
So you get the feedback, and then he's improving it immediately.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing, actually, he said that this sort of surprised me, because I didn't speak with him directly, but his time management has improved as he's um, making, as he needs to get this essay in, he also has to get his other schoolwork in. And so he's done a concerted effort to think about how am I using my time well.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of benefits to this kind of system, which is exactly what I was thinking about when we first launched the company,
Yeah.
was bringing together the learning skills
Mhm.
with kind of the worldview and pedagogy. And
Well, yeah, things like that also look so good on a transcript.
yeah. Oh,
Like
yeah.
the name of a course you could give that, like comparing Jonathan Edwards and Benjamin Franklin, adds sparkle in a way that, just American history or American literature or something.
Yeah.
It is a nice richness. So that's
Yeah.
just, homeschool geek. We're always looking for something
Yeah.
with the transcript nice.
Yeah.
So,
That's
okay.
great.
All right. So, Justin, tell everybody how to find Trinity House Tutoring.
Yeah. So our website is trinityhousetutorials.com. So trinityhousetutorials.com. And so we just launched our website recently. So we're still building some of that out, but people can get in touch with us there. They can join our newsletter. We're actually going to be coming out with, in the next few weeks, just like a PDF bookmark that students can use, put it in their books, and it's just a short guide for critical reading, which is one of the things you need
Oh,
in the Oxford tutorial. So
oh,
some of those questions are kind of modeled after Mortimer Adler's How to Read a Book.
uh-huh.
But it kind of just is something you can reference, like what should I be asking? What questions should I be asking? Or what
Yeah.
answers should I be finding when I'm looking carefully at a book and its argument? So that's something that folks can get in the near future. But trinityhousetutorials.com is where they can find us. We're also on Instagram and Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. And so if they search Trinity House, they should find us
We
there.
can find you. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think this will be very exciting for some families who need to just add some sparkle and some
Yeah.
growth in a new way. So,
Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah.
Thank
This,
yeah.
sorry, real quick on this. The students we love to work with are students that are kind of motivated, looking for a unique learning opportunity, or gifted.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so, yeah, for students that are like, I want to tackle something
Mhm.
and get a unique learning experience, this is definitely for those
Yeah.
students.
Yeah. Yeah. So I can see some mothers' eyes twinkling as they listen to this. They're like, oh, and then dragging their kids over to listen to the podcast. So, well, thank you, Justin, for joining us. And everybody, I'll put links in the show notes. And so you'll be able to contact Justin and Trinity House Tutorials. Well, thank you, Justin. And this has
Yeah. Thank
been,
you, Vicki.
yeah, the Homeschool High School podcast brought to you by Seven Sisters Homeschool.com and the Ultimate Homeschool Podcast Network. And thank you to Seth Tillman for editing. We will see you all next week.